Hey everyone, Jason here, digital marketing consultant, and quick question for you. Would you rather be paid like an Uber driver or an F1 race car driver? Because the answer to that question will not only determine your consulting business model, but also how profitable your new consulting business will be. Timestamps below, along with some other helpful videos to growing and actually acquiring new clients for your business. So let's go ahead and jump right in here, taking a look at this diagram. On the first part, we're actually going to skip the client acquisition side. Again, links in the description to lots of videos that go through how to actually acquire clients. Here, we're going to focus on your actual product offerings and then how you can actually scale with this business model that we've developed over the past couple of years. And so you're going to have one front-end package, then you're going to have 2 to 3 add-on packages, and then of course that sweet reoccurring revenue where you figure out some way to actually retain and keep clients on with you after all of those front-end packages are complete. And then we'll wrap up, when you stick around to the end, with how to actually productize your service, and we'll be sharing our actual process for making sure clients are kept happy and satisfied through the entire engagement process. So let's jump right into your package. Now, going back to our example, we'll look at the Uber driver versus the F1 race car driver. They technically both have the same skill, and it's the same skill as someone who drives for FedEx or UPS, right? They all drive some sort of vehicle with 4 wheels, right? Just the F1 car costs a heck of a lot more than, let's say, a UPS truck or a normal sedan that an Uber driver might be driving. And so the reason that we go through this facetious example is Uber drivers, they pretty much go around picking up any client that they can get, right? Whereas the FedEx and UPS drivers have a very specific route that they take every single day because they know exactly who they're targeting. And then we have the F1 race car driver that does one thing and one thing only, and then builds a team around them. Now, I know this is a bit of a facetious example, but when it comes to consulting, a lot of new consultants walk around as if they're Uber drivers, just looking for anyone who's up for a ride, versus the F1 race car driver who decides on the one race they're going to do, the one thing they're going to do, and they build a team around them. Now, I'm not ragging on Uber drivers or anyone who does anything other than drive for an F1 race team, right? It's just an example of focus and how the same skill can actually result in incredibly different incomes. So enough with the silly example, let's dive into what exactly your package should be. The whole point here is that you might have the same skills as hundreds of other people in your area, right? But the way that you can differentiate yourself is identifying a very specific problem for a very specific person and then going after that specific type of business or customer. And so with a package, what you want to do is come up with some sort of result that your ideal customer is looking for, and then create a complete service that would solve that issue for them. A great example of this is something that we do with our digital marketing agency. Is we offer a Google Ads foundation. So we target a specific type of business, and then we just brainstormed, okay, if a business wants to run ads on Google, what is everything they need in order to be successful? And we listed all of that out, and that became our front-end package. Now, if you're not quite sure what your package should look like in your niche or industry, there's a site that actually has a bunch of examples for you, and that is Fiverr.com. Now, pump the brakes, because I'm not saying that you should only charge $5 to $50 for your package. Not at all. What you can do, though, is head over to Fiverr and take a look at the gigs that are being offered, and it will give you a good understanding of how you can put together your services into a package. And it's very important that you create a package and you stick to it. You're not an Uber driver going around trying to find anyone who's interested in getting a ride or purchasing your product or service. You have to be focused and you have to stick to whatever your package is. And that's going to be incredibly important when we get to the end, when we talk about how to actually scale and productize your service. Because if you're doing something different for every single client who comes through the door, you're going to be in for a real headache, and you're not going to be able to scale long term. In addition to the long-term benefit of being able to scale, the package also helps you fight against scope creep, which is one of the biggest headaches and killers of new consulting businesses. Because when you say that, hey, you know, I'll do this for you and it's this price, and there's no itemized list of exactly what you're going to do or exactly what is included in your package or service, well, guess what? You're going to have some awkward conversations later on down the road when a client asks you for something that's not actually a part of what you originally thought you were going to have to do. And so packages help you combat and stave off scope creep, which is a huge problem. The other big advantage here is it helps you disconnect your work from time because you're selling a package with a result, and the time factor for you and how much time it actually takes you is completely removed from the equation, and it's not even part of the sales conversation, which is very important for you in terms of scaling long term, but also not feeling like you're stuck tracking your time as a consultant. Now, the next step here is once you identify that package, stick to your guns, stay focused there. The next step is figuring out how you can actually add on to that package. Now, what's very important here with the add-on services is that they're actually additional, and if they aren't taken up by the client or the client doesn't ask for them, your package can stand on its own. It's very important. So I'll go through an example. So when we first got started creating our front-end package for our Google ads, we actually didn't include anything with conversion tracking or landing page conversion optimization because we figured that most businesses would actually have that. Well, turns out we were incredibly wrong. So there are two things we could have done. Number one, we could have created a separate service where if we found out that the client didn't have that conversion tracking set up, we could say, hey, for an additional X amount, we can actually set up the conversion tracking as well, but it's not actually in part of the foundation. Well, what we found is we can't run ads effectively without having the conversion tracking. So what we had to do is we had to take what we thought was extra and include it in our package, which increased our package's price, which made the package harder to sell, especially to people who already thought they had conversion tracking in, but it's been almost 4 years now and we have not had one new client who had it set up 100% correctly, right? And so sometimes you'll find that you need to include things in your package that your client doesn't actually want, but you know that it's necessary in order for them to be successful. And in so those particular instances, you're not going to want to create an add-on. You're going to have to include it because you know that if it's not included in the package, the client's not going to get the end successful result that they want. And sometimes that means you're going to have to wind up charging more. And yes, it's a pain in the ass in the sales process because sometimes your prices might be a little higher, but the clients that you do get will be a whole lot happier on the back end and you're much more likely to get a referral, right? So just keep in mind when you're creating additional things or coming up with additional add-ons, 3 to the absolute max, make sure that they are actually optional things as opposed to something that should have been included with your original package. Now, the third step here in creating your packages and your business model is going to be figuring out what kinds of things you can offer on a reoccurring basis so you can keep the clients that you've worked so hard to keep happy and actually acquire in the first place. Now, this one can be a little tricky, but there are 2 main ways that you can keep clients on. There's the retainer model, and then there's the ongoing services model, which is essentially a package that repeats month after month or whatever the time frame may be. So this is essentially something that you create so that you can keep the client relationship going. It's normally going to be significantly less than whatever the initial package or add-ons were, but there are 3 big advantages before we get into the 2 different types that you can offer. Advantage number 1 is this almost always gives you right of first refusal. So what this means is even if you come up with something that's not very profitable for you, it keeps that door open and you're much more likely to get the questions or get requests for new projects as opposed to them going and finding somebody else, right? Because they're already doing business with you, you've been working with them for X amount of time, so they're much more likely to come to you with new work or new projects, and you actually become more of an expert and advisor in their eyes, and so you're much more likely to get that new work as opposed to someone else. The second big advantage here is it does bring some predictability to your consulting practice because it can be really annoying and sometimes frightening when you haven't closed any clients for a specific amount of time, and maybe it's a month or 2 and you've just had a dry spell and there's no income coming in because you don't have any new clients. So it can bring some predictability to your cash flow. And the third and final reason that this is really powerful is it can actually help against question creep. Yes, that's right. Question creep. And this ties into the retainer model. So the first model you can go with is some sort of retainer model where you essentially stay on to answer their questions 48/5. So you're not 24/7, that's within 48 hours, five business days a week, right? If you want to be 24/7, go ahead. Personally, that was something that I could not handle at all. I got questions at the weirdest times, and we just had to go to 48/5 with our retainer. So what the retainer essentially is you are an advisor, and so they have the ability to email or schedule a phone call with you. They can't call you up at random, but email or schedule a phone call with you to ask questions about whatever your area of expertise is. Now, what's important here is you aren't actually lifting a finger to do any work. You're just using this. You're giving them strategies, you're giving them insights based upon your experience, but you're not actually doing any of the work, right? So that's the retainer model. And that also helps, again, to question creep during one of your packages, because something that you may find is you might be doing some work and then all of a sudden they're asking questions that have really nothing to do with what you're working on. Sure, they're in your niche or industry, in your area of expertise, and so having some sort of retainer is something great to offer. And we've had to do that a couple of times where we say, hey, whoa, we're just working on Google Ads, or we're just doing your Facebook stuff, but if you want help with your sales funnel, we have a retainer model we don't say retainer model. We have a service where we can provide feedback or do copyright reviews, and that's over here. And so then you have something to point to say, hey, you're asking for this, but it's part of that package, not necessarily what you're talking about here. And of course, the second type of ongoing that you can provide is some sort of service. As an example, for us, we manage advertising accounts on a month-to-month basis. And of course, the period with which the contract renews is up to you. But something to keep in mind is the lifetime value of a customer. Because no matter how great your advice is, or no matter how hard you work with your ongoing service, at the end of the day, it's reasonable to assume that after a certain number of months or years, they're going to move on, right? And so something you want to track is the average amount of months or years someone stays on with you before they decide to move on to somebody else or their business just changes, right? So you also want to make sure that you aren't being unrealistic with how long someone's going to stay on your retainer. And so that can also affect the price that you charge, because if you're charging something super low because you expect them to stay with you a year, but you find that people only stay with you 3 months, then you might actually need to bump up that price so that you're protected, because you know that most of them are going to leave after 3 months anyway. And so that does it for the 3 core components of your consulting business model: having that front-end package, having 1 to 3, oh my gosh, losing my numbers here. So 1 to 3 add-on packages, and then having some sort of ongoing package, whether that's doing some sort of ongoing service that's clearly defined, it's just a package that repeats itself, or some sort of retainer model where you're an advisor answering questions. Now, this next step is going to be arguably one of the most important parts of your business model, and that is optimizing your delivery. So go ahead and take a look at this quick diagram. I'll link up in the cards in the description to a video that takes a much deeper dive on exactly every single step of this process. I'm going to 80/20 and walk through how we make sure that our packages are very optimized from an internal perspective, because after all, it's really hard to productize your service if you're doing something new for every single person. So what we do is we have phase number 1 of any package we offer is our onboarding process. We have some email templates that we automatically send them. We ask for the information that we need in order to be successful, and then we have a welcome call. So those are the 3 steps that we go through for every single new engagement, irrespective of what the package is. Now, this is really important to copy for your own consulting business, because number 1, you want to present an organized front as soon as someone gives you that payment information, because when you send out an email that is templatized, even though it's not as personal, you do want to personalize the first who it's to, and then of course the first paragraph referencing whatever you talked about in your sales conversation. But after that, have it very, very formulated to present to the client so they know that you've done this before, this isn't your first rodeo, and you are on top of things. So maximum of 3 welcome emails, and those emails simply ask for the information that you need. And so once you've collected all that information you need to be successful, you have a welcome call with them, and that's where you alleviate any stress and answer any questions. And so what you want to end the intake phase with is, number 1, the client has peace of mind that you know what the heck you're doing, and number 2, you have all the information that you need to go to start working, which is going to be phase number 2. And here, this is going to be just where you're doing your work. Ideally, you don't have a lot of communication with the client here because you're busy doing their work. If you need to ask questions of the client or you need to get feedback, then you want to create milestones ahead of time so the client knows when you're going to be contacting them or when they can expect to see some work. By simply telling the client when they're going to see the first deliverable or when they're going to see some sort of result is going to alleviate their stress, and they're going to be much less likely to email or call you every other day asking how things are going because you have a clear milestones. And it helps you stay focused on your work and not have to answer 21 questions from the client, right? And so once you're done with your work, you move on to the offboarding phase. And this is arguably just as important as the first two because you want to make sure that when the client leaves the door, they have everything they need and they're super happy so you can start getting some referrals, right? Referrals are very powerful to growing your consulting practice. So here what you want to do is deliver some sort of rough draft, and then you have some sort of timeline for reviews and revisions. It's very important that you have clear timelines for how long someone has to get back to you with revisions. I had a consulting friend who wound up forgetting to do this, and she wound up having a website build drag out for over 6 months because the client took so long to get back with basic revisions. So you definitely want to be very, very clear and stringent with these revisions and make sure that you aren't just waiting around twiddling your thumbs saying, well, it's been a month and they haven't said anything and I think I get my final payment or I think we're done. So you really want to make sure that you're very clear with how long someone has in order to give you feedback on your revisions. And of course, you'll have some sort of offboarding process where you summarize everything that you did, you let them know how to use whatever they've been given, and then that conversation is where you bring up your reoccurring service, right? So that does it for the best business consulting model that we found. Go ahead and comment below if you have any questions with your own niche or industry or how to apply this to your new consulting practice, because it's been a long road for us and we definitely want to make sure that it's a lot easier when you get started. So hit that like button, subscribe for more great business building videos just like this one, and until the next, keep building the business you love.